The story begins with Haruto, a young boy no older than 10. His father had to move away from the city they lived in, and so the boy stood, saying goodbye to the girl he loved. Despite his young age, he did what many grown men fail to do, my friend. Looking into her tearful eyes, he said, I have to go with my father now, but I promise you, I will come back and marry you. Even if I die or get killed, I will still return to you. The girl was deeply heartbroken. She didn't want to part with him, but life never goes the way we hope, and so the boy left, and the years passed. One day, Haruto was riding a bus when he noticed a little girl staring at him. Before he could even process what was happening, a horrific accident struck. Everyone on the bus died, except Haruto. He opened his eyes, his head pounding with pain. He looked around and realized his body had changed. The place was unfamiliar, and everything around him was foreign. Confusing memories flooded his mind. His head throbbed with unbearable pain, and he couldn't make sense of anything. He soon discovered the truth. After his death, he had been transported to another world. Now, he lived under a new name, Rio. A group of workers entered the room he was in, carrying a bag that held something inside. They opened it and began eating. Rio, starving, approached, but one of the men snapped at him. Get away from me, your stench is ruining the food. Crushed, Rio walked out and ate a few pieces of fruit he found on the ground. But the memories still haunted his mind. Two bodies, two sets of memories, clashing inside one soul. A voice echoing endlessly in his head. Trying to pull himself together, he muttered, Haruto is dead in his world. I am Rio now. I must continue. I will never forget my goal. I will avenge my mother. He had watched his mother be murdered before his eyes when he was just a child. He would never forget that moment, and he had sworn to get revenge. While lost in thought, he was interrupted by a group of girls in clean clothes. They were looking for a missing girl and asked him if he had seen anyone. Rio denied it, saying he didn't know anything. But the girls didn't believe him and hurled insults at him. Then, one girl, with white hair, stepped forward with gentle grace and said, I'm sorry for what my sisters said. They're just upset because our sister is missing. I need some information from you. Rio admired her manner and calmly told her everything he knew. The girl, named Celia, used her magic to try to locate her sister, but she couldn't find any trace of her. Instead, she discovered something unexpected. Rio was the only one in the area with magical energy similar to theirs. She didn't know how he had that power, but she didn't question him further. As thanks for the information, she handed him a bag full of money and politely took her leave with the others. Rio opened the bag and smiled when he saw the money inside. He quickly tied it around his neck and rushed back to the cabin to resume work, but the moment he opened the door, a man lunged at him and struck him hard in the chest, sending him to the ground. Thankfully, the blow hit the bag tied to his chest and spared his life. Frustrated that Rio had survived, the attacker moved in to finish him. Rio was terrified, frozen in fear, unable to move or think clearly. Suddenly, a strange girl appeared in front of him. She gently grabbed his face and said, There's no time. You have to awaken your powers now, or we'll both die. In that instant, Rio understood, and then it happened. He transformed into Haruto once again. The memories from his first life rushed in. His combat skills, sharp and deadly, came back instantly. He grabbed the criminal and shattered his skull in one clean strike. Catching his breath, he noticed the money bag moving beside him. He opened it, and to his shock, there she was, the missing girl. She was trembling, her voice full of fear. Please, take me to the castle. My father will reward you if you bring me back. Before he could respond, she fainted from the horror of seeing the dead bodies around her. Rio lifted her onto his shoulder and set out to find the girls to return her safely. They spotted him from a distance, but as he approached, one of them rushed forward and slapped him across the face. You lied to us earlier. You said you didn't know anything, and now you're carrying her? You kidnap her. Let her go. Don't touch her again. Rio tried to explain, but the girl wouldn't listen. She was furious and fully convinced he was the culprit. Their leader raised her sword and pointed it at him. You denied knowing her before, and now you bring her back? You're coming with us to the castle. You'll confess everything there. We'll decide afterward if you're innocent or guilty. If you are innocent, you'll be rewarded. Rio asked, and what if I refuse to go with you? She answered coldly, don't misunderstand. This isn't a request, it's an order. And so, they took him to the castle. Meanwhile, the police arrived at his workplace and arrested the real criminal. They were about to interrogate him when a masked man appeared and said, the mission failed. He activated a small device, and just like that, the criminal was dead. The masked man vanished, clearly planning something far more sinister. Back at the castle, Vanessa took the princess, Flora, to her bed to treat her injuries. Rio, however, was thrown into prison for interrogation. A guard chained him up and said, listen carefully. Either confess that you kidnapped the princess, or I'll force you to talk. But Rio was completely innocent. I didn't kidnap anyone, he replied firmly. The guard didn't believe him. He beat Rio mercilessly, demanding answers. Rio, bruised and bloodied, stayed silent. He would not admit to something he didn't do. At that moment, Flora regained consciousness. Vanessa was sitting beside her, waiting for her to wake up. As soon as she opened her eyes, Vanessa told her everything. Flora immediately cried out, why did you imprison him? He saved my life. Bring him here at once. We need to reward him. Vanessa rushed to the prison and was horrified by Rio's condition. She shouted at the guard, I told you to to treat him gently. Why did you do this to him? The guard defended himself. He's a spy. He kidnapped the princess. Give me a little more time and he'll confess. Vanessa snapped, release him now. He's the one who saved her. Stunned, the guard obeyed. Rio, however, was still angry and refused to speak to anyone, not even Celia. She used healing magic to tend to his wounds, which slowly began to close. Later, Rio woke up in bed, surprised his pain was gone. Celia stood by and said softly, don't worry, you're safe now. The king himself will honor you in 2 days. She added, I'm truly sorry we hurt you yesterday. I promise, it won't happen again. Rio smiled faintly and replied, it's all right. But since I'll be meeting the king, I'll need your help. Teach me how to speak properly in front of him. I don't want to cause any trouble. After she agreed and extended her hand to help him up, a wave of immense joy washed over him, as if the entire world had suddenly lit up around him. Soon after, the king held a grand ceremony in which he honored Rio and officially announced his enrollment into the Noble Academy. The atmosphere was serene and magnificent. After the ceremony, Celia met him on the staircase, introduced him to his class, explained everything he needed to know, and informed him that she would be their instructor. Since Rio had joined late and exams were just around the corner, she told him, if you ever need any help, come to me and I'll give you private lessons. Rio was overjoyed by her words and gladly agreed. When he entered the classroom, however, he wasn't welcomed warmly. All his classmates came from wealthy noble families, and they couldn't comprehend why the king would allow a peasant like Rio to attend their school. Rio paid no attention to their comments and quietly took his seat. Later, he went to Celia to study more, and things went smoothly from there. He continued studying with her until exam time finally arrived. While Rio was preparing, he was pushing himself very hard, which worried Celia. She tried to convince him to take it easy, reminding him he was still new and that grades weren't everything. But Rio reassured her with a calm voice, I just want to learn, that's all. The exams began, and everyone took them seriously. A month later, the results were posted, and everyone gathered around to see how Rio had done. To everyone's surprise, Rio ranked first. One of the students erupted with anger, shouting, that's impossible. He must have cheated or had someone help him. He was full of arrogance and baseless accusations. But Princess Christina stepped forward and said firmly, if you have no solid proof of cheating, then it's shameful for a noble like you to act this way. Embarrassed, the boy backed off and left. After the results, Celia took Rio to her room to celebrate. She was genuinely thrilled by how quickly he learned and began to feel a deep connection with him, as if he resembled her. Rio, on the other hand, treated her as though she were younger than him, and their bond continued to grow stronger each day. 5 years passed. One day, the sword instructor noticed Rio's skill in swordsmanship and selected him, along with 2 other students, to represent the academy in the upcoming tournament. Many objected to the teacher's decision, but he stood firm and said, Rio will compete, and that's final. Before the tournament, as Rio stood with Celia, she asked him, what do you plan to do after graduation? He paused, then said, I'll leave this country. I want to visit my mother's homeland, the one she told me about when I was young. Celia was clearly saddened, but she didn't show it in front of him. Days passed, and the tournament finally began. 3 students were to challenge 3 knights to showcase what they had learned. The first match was Rio's. As the referee called his name, another student sneered at him, saying, try not to embarrass us. Just lose quickly and get off the stage. Rio ignored him and stepped into the arena. The referee called out the opponent. Charles, step forward. Rio immediately recognized him. It was the same man who had questioned him when he first arrived at the castle. Charles was still angry. His rank had dropped after his previous encounter with Rio, and he had been punished. The referee signaled for the match to begin. Charles launched a barrage of powerful attacks, not giving Rio a moment to breathe. Attack after attack, Rio barely managed to defend himself, and the spectators thought he was done for. But then, Rio suddenly struck back, disarming Charles with ease. The referee was stunned and declared Rio the winner. Charles stood there trembling, yelling, I was just holding back. Give me another chance, and I won't go easy. But the referee shouted, enough! You lost fair and square in front of everyone. Accept your defeat. Charles begrudgingly admitted his loss and left. Celia and the instructor were overjoyed for Rio, and the crowd was in awe, except for Charles. That night, he sat drinking alone, muttering, that boy. He reminds me of my darkest day. Every time I see him, I feel humiliated. I don't want to see his face again. The man beside him asked, have you known him for a long time? Charles replied, do you remember 5 years ago when Princess Flora was kidnapped? He was the one who rescued her, and when I interrogated him, I hit him. The king punished me for it. The man's expression changed. Doubts about Rio grew in his mind. He began to suspect that Rio might be the same person who killed the criminal, and perhaps even someone planning to destroy the royal family. Meanwhile, Celia stood beneath a tree, waiting eagerly for Rio. Suddenly, another girl approached him and confessed her love. Rio didn't respond, and the girl walked away, but Celia had seen it all, and she was deeply affected. It seemed she had fallen for him. Later, as Celia reviewed the students' graduation forms, she noticed Rio hadn't submitted one. Her suspicions grew stronger. She realized he didn't plan to stay in the kingdom, and sorrow filled her heart. A new semester began, and Celia was now teaching magic. All the students used their magic normally, while Rio pretended he didn't know how, but in reality, his hidden magical energy surpassed them all. No one knew this, of course. course. After class, as everyone left, Rio approached Celia, but before he could speak, a student came up and mocked him in front of her. He sneered, "You worthless peasant. Stop clinging to the girls before I lose my temper. You think I don't know how you flirt every day?" Rio remained silent, but Celia snapped at the boy. "Enough. He hasn't done anything you've accused him of." The boy was enraged by her defense of Rio, but he had no choice but to leave. The next day, the students were assigned a field mission to explore the forest and reach its end. A senior student named Steele explained the terrain and everything they needed to know. Everything seemed perfectly in order. Then, another map appeared, one said to have come from the Stewart family, the same family that arrogant boy belonged to. According to his claim, the map contained a shortcut that would lead them to the end of the forest as quickly as possible. Naturally, everyone believed him and followed Steele, since he was supposed to be their leader. At first, they encountered a group of weak monsters, which they quickly eliminated in seconds. They continued onward until they reached a dead end. Everyone was confused. One of them asked, "Where's the path, Steele?" The boy seemed genuinely baffled, unsure of what was happening or why the path had disappeared. Suddenly, more dangerous monsters ambushed them from behind. The entire group was trapped. One of the monsters struck with a spear and injured the boy's leg, causing him to fall to the ground screaming. In the process, he collided with Princess Flora and accidentally pushed her toward the edge of the cliff. In that moment, Rio threw aside everything he was carrying and used his powers to pull the princess back up, but ended up falling in her place. Although he wasn't hurt by the fall, he didn't know how he would face the others upon returning, or how he would even explain what had happened. Meanwhile, the other students banded together to fight the monster and managed to defeat it. The boy's leg was treated shortly afterward. When they asked him what had happened, they said, "Didn't you push Princess Flora and nearly kill her?" He denied everything, claiming that Rio, the servant, was terrified of the monsters and had accidentally shoved him, which caused him to fall into Flora. Then he said, because Rio felt guilty, he threw himself over the edge to bear the punishment. How disgusting. Where did he even get the nerve to fabricate such lies? Yet sadly, everyone believed him, except for Flora. She knew the truth and wanted to find Rio no matter what. Meanwhile, someone was watching from the shadows, plotting a trap for Rio to test his true power and confirm whether he was the one who had killed that criminal in the past. While the students were walking along peacefully, Rio was hidden nearby, listening to the pig's lies and deciding not to return to the town again for fear of causing more trouble. Besides, he had never felt comfortable there. He had been thinking about leaving for a long time. Suddenly, a massive and unfamiliar monster appeared before the students. They tried to attack it using their powers, but it was useless. The monster was far too strong. It struck several students, laughed mockingly, and charged at them like they were prey. Everyone realized they couldn't win, so they scattered and fled as fast as they could. Only Flora remained. She had seen some of the injured students and ran to help them. The monster noticed her and started moving toward her, and she seemed doomed. Terrified, she screamed for help as the monster reached out to kill her. But how could such a thing happen while the legend Rio was around? He appeared suddenly and sliced off the monster's arm, shouting, "Run from here now!" He activated his spiritual energy and began battling the monster furiously. Flora watched in awe, mesmerized by the sheer power he possessed. Rio fought the beast with incredible skill. Then, gathering his energy into his sword, he struck a single clean blow that severed the monster's head. He had killed it all by himself. The other students finally arrived at Flora's location, but Rio spotted them just in time. He used his power and vanished before anyone could see him. However, the man lurking in the shadows had seen everything and now knew who Rio really was. It looked like he had dark plans in mind. At the end of the day, after all the students had returned to the castle, Celia was carrying some items to deliver to the king. Just before knocking on the door, she heard Rio's name being mentioned inside the chamber. She paused, focused on the conversation, and moved closer to listen. The pig boy's father was saying to the king, "My son caused today's incident, and I sincerely apologize, but I cannot allow him to be punished. We must place the blame on Rio." Upon hearing this, the king began to think carefully, then replied, "As long as the blame is cast on a boy of no noble origin, it doesn't matter. The important thing is not to weaken the royal family or lose the Stewart family." The king agreed and said, "Do whatever you see fit." He smiled wickedly, clearly knowing exactly what he intended to do. As for Celia, after hearing all of that, she rushed to the library, her heart filled with worry for Rio. Moments later, Rio entered, disguised to say goodbye before leaving. She ran to him and hugged him tightly, checking his body to make sure he was all right. Once she was assured of his safety, she sat him down, and he began telling her everything that had happened in detail. After learning the truth, she became furious, but didn't know what she could possibly do. Rio then told her that he could no longer stay in the city and had to escape as soon as possible. He said, "But because you're the dearest person to my heart, I came to say goodbye." Celia was deeply moved by his words. She replied, "Take care of yourself. I'll wait for your letters to know you're safe. Just don't keep me waiting too long." He said, "All right, but I'll send the letters under a different name, Haruto, so no one becomes suspicious. Goodbye, Celia." She ran to him once more and hugged him tightly. "I'll wait for you," she whispered. Then he left, and her eyes filled with tears she could barely hold back. She recalled all their memories together, overwhelmed by sorrow. Rio left the forest, heading toward his birthplace, Nagumo City. On his way, He passed through Arslan City and stopped to eat and relax for a bit. While browsing the wanted posters, he was relieved to see that his name wasn't on the list. He entered a restaurant but felt someone watching him. He turned around. No one was there, so he continued on his way. Suddenly, someone behind him shouted, "Ramen!" He was shocked. Ramen! Here. He couldn't believe it. He sat down, had a bowl, and asked the restaurant owner, "Where do you get your ingredients and spices?" The owner pointed to a nearby store, so Rio went there and bought everything he needed. After that, he sent a letter to Celia, letting her know he was all right and everything was going smoothly. Then he left the city and resumed his journey. But on the road, he spotted a girl lying on the ground. As he approached to help her, she surprised him with a poisoned needle. She stood up and said, "I'm going to kill you." Rio immediately dropped his belongings and began healing himself using his power. "I won't let you kill me." A fierce battle broke out between them. The girl was incredibly strong, wielding the energy of demi-beasts and skillfully using magic. Rio didn't know how to handle her at first and tried to analyze her style, then realized she was focused entirely on a specific dagger. So, he deliberately left an opening in his defense, tempting her to strike. When she lunged, Rio struck with overwhelming force, knocked her to the ground, and disarmed her. "You've lost," he told her. After the girl was captured, her eyes suddenly changed. She began to cry bitterly and called out for her mother to come save her. Rio didn't understand what was happening and used his powers to try and calm her down. Then, she fainted, memories flashing through her mind. Memories of what had led her to this moment. She was from the same world as Haruto. She had boarded the very same bus he had before his death. After she died, she too awoke in this world, but as a slave, forced to serve the arrogant son of Stuart. That vile boy tormented her every single day, beating her until she could no longer resist. Around her neck was a slave collar, one that sent jolts of electricity through her body whenever she disobeyed his orders. When Rio saw the collar, he realized someone must have ordered her to kill him, so he focused his mind and began searching for a spell that could remove it. After much effort, he succeeded, and the collar was finally broken. Latina awoke to find Rio standing before her, his hand extended toward her. Fear surged through her, and she scrambled to reach for the knives behind him, but Rio calmly said, "Don't try it. There's no point in what you're doing. I know you were forced to follow his orders and that you tried to kill me because of him. Don't worry. You're free now." He asked her to tell him what had happened, and once she realized she wouldn't be hurt again, her eyes welled up with tears. She broke down sobbing and began telling him everything. Stuart had ordered her to kill Rio the moment he left the city, ensuring she left no evidence behind. That's why his name was never listed among the wanted. At that moment, Rio understood it was all the work of that pig, and he told her, "All right, you're free now. I've broken your chains, and if you wish to return to your fellow Beastkin, walk that path for 2 days, and you'll reach them. Stay with them. Don't ever go back to Stuart." He slung his bag over his shoulder and prepared to leave, but to his surprise, she followed him. He turned and asked, "What do you want?" She replied, "I want to go with you. I hate walking alone. Please don't leave me." Rio grew angry. "How do you expect me to forgive you? You tried to kill me. Do you honestly think I could forgive someone who tried to take my life? You're dreaming." The girl trembled in fear, but then reached into her pocket and pulled out the broken collar. She held it out to him and said, "Take me with you, even if it means being a slave again. Just please don't leave me here alone." Rio was moved by her words. "What's your name?" he asked. "Latina," she replied. "All right, Latina. From today onward, you'll travel with me. Let's go." Latina's joy was overwhelming. They continued on their journey, and partway through, they stopped to eat. It was the first time she had ever tasted proper food. She ate while crying from happiness, unable to believe it was real. Rio smiled and said, "Take your time. No one's going to steal your food. Why are you eating so fast?" Latina didn't hear him at first, too focused on eating. But when she realized what he'd said, she looked up and replied, "This is the first time someone has treated me kindly. I'm just so happy." Rio was pleased to hear that. "Then from now on, you'll eat the best meals every day, and no one will ever hit you again." Meanwhile, far away, Celia was reading a letter from Haruto. Her heart brimmed with joy. She missed him deeply and silently wished him all the best. That night, Rio and Latina set up camp. Rio took out a bowl of ramen and began preparing it as spaghetti. To his surprise, Latina recognized it instantly, calling it by its name from their former world. Rio was shocked. "How do you know its name?" he asked. "I used to eat it before," she said, though she didn't tell him where. Rio grew more suspicious that she'd gone through a similar experience to his, but he still wasn't sure. Later that night, as she slept, Latina was tormented by nightmares, visions of Japan, and the accident that had taken her life. That's when Rio knew for certain she was from the same world. He felt a deep sorrow for her and found himself growing more attached. By morning, they resumed their journey. The bond between them grew stronger. Latina began to see Rio as an older brother, a protector who would shield her from all harm. She was truly happy by his side. Eventually, they arrived at a dense forest. There, Rio noticed a peculiar tree, one that Latina couldn't see. Sensing something strange, he moved closer and suggested they rest for the night and continue in the morning. Latina entered the tent to sleep, and Rio followed shortly after. But suddenly, a noise outside caught his attention. He stepped out and was startled to find a wolf staring him down. The wolf emitted a blinding light, and 4 beastkin surrounded him. him. Rio was completely confused. He tried to defend himself and understand what they wanted, but they kept attacking him relentlessly. One of the girls approached to interrogate him, while another entered the tent and found Latina inside. She instantly assumed Rio had kidnapped her. Furious, they began to beat Rio mercilessly until he lost consciousness. As darkness swallowed him, that mysterious girl reappeared in his dream. "How have you been, Haruto? It's been a while," she said. "Sorry, I can't help you in your current situation, but the least I can do is give you a pleasant dream." Then she vanished. Rio awoke to find himself chained to a bed. The girls who had attacked him entered the room, accompanied by the village priestess. But before the elder could speak, Latina burst into the room, rushing to his side and embracing him with relief. She was overjoyed to find him unharmed and apologized for not being able to help. She asked who had done this to him. Realizing their grave mistake, the girls apologized sincerely. They unchained him, and the elder instructed them to prepare a comfortable room for him. Now that they understood he was innocent, the old priestess said, "Tomorrow I will formally apologize. For now, rest." Rio agreed, still unsure of what was going on. The next morning, he spoke with the elder, asking her about the mysterious tree and why only he could see it. She explained, "It's because of the spirits. Those with the ability to use them can see that tree." "Do you use spirits, Rio?" He replied, "Something like that." They entered a sacred chamber within the village, where two elders awaited. Their demeanor was gentle, and they spoke to Rio with great respect. First, they apologized for the way he had been brought in. Then they said, "You have earned a reward for saving one of our kin." Rio responded, "I'd like you to take care of Latina. She's been attached to me ever since we met, but my journey is dangerous, and I may not be able to protect her." The old priestess stepped forward. "We already intended to do that. Choose another gift, Rio." He replied, "If you have someone who can teach me the art of spirits, I would be truly grateful." They all agreed. "Consider it done." Then, a woman entered the room. Everyone stood in respect. Her name was Doris, the spirit of the tree, revered by all. She approached Rio, placed her hand on his head, and said, "Strange, inside you sleeps a human soul." Rio didn't understand. "What do you mean? There's another soul inside me?" Doris explained. "Yes, you possess a power unlike any other. Within you lies a dormant soul, human in form. If it awakens, it will grant you tremendous support and vastly enhance your abilities." Rio struggled to grasp the full meaning of her words, but simply nodded and said, "All right." Days passed in the village, and Rio had begun his intense training, seeking to enhance his spiritual energy. He learned new skills under the guidance of everyone in the forest. As for Latina, she now lived in a clean home alongside 3 demi-human girls. For the first time in a long while, she seemed genuinely happy. Meanwhile, a criminal was seen heading toward a cave, accompanied by a young boy. At the cave's entrance, the man said to the boy, "Stay here. I'm going to do something inside and we'll be right back." Moments after entering, he emerged holding a dragon egg in his hands. The boy, bewildered, asked why he had taken it. The man replied coldly, "That's none of your concern. I'm going to run some experiments on it. Just carry it and keep it with you until we reach the city." The boy obeyed, though his anxiety was obvious. Nervously, he asked, "Won't the dragons come after us? Why did we take their egg?" The man laughed wickedly. "Relax, no one will find us. We're far enough away now." But as he glanced back, his smirk faded. A swarm of dragons was flying straight toward them, their eyes brimming with fury. At that very moment, Rio and Latina had just been officially recognized as members of the village. Doris herself had bestowed upon them the seal of belonging. A great celebration was held in their honor, filled with joy and cheer. Latina had fully blended in with the other girls and truly adored her new life. Seeing this, Rio decided it was time to tell her his intentions to leave. Elsewhere, the criminal and his companion had stopped at a site near the forest. The man said, "We'll rest here tonight. Take this pill. I'll go scout the area." The boy took the pill, though he looked uneasy. The man then used his magic to soar into the sky, heading toward the dragon's nest. Finally, he muttered to himself, "It's time to execute the plan." Meanwhile, Rio had taken Latina deep into the forest. He wanted to speak with her alone and share his decision. Latina walked beside him, smiling brightly. "Let's go back and rejoin the celebration," she said. "Why are we heading away from everyone?" "I need to talk to you about something important," Rio replied. "But first, I have one question. Have you enjoyed your life in this village?" "Enjoyed it?" she exclaimed. "I absolutely love it. Everyone is kind to me. I have friends. Life here is peaceful and warm." "That's wonderful," Rio said, smiling. "But there's something I must tell you. I'll be leaving the village to continue my journey alone. I don't want you to get hurt if something bad happens." Latina froze, her expression quickly clouding with sorrow. "No," she said softly. "I won't let you go. I want to come with you." Rio tried to explain that his journey was dangerous and he might not be able to protect her, but she was heartbroken and walked away without another word. Back in the city, alarms rang out as the dragons approached. Guards were mobilized to face the threat. At the same time, the criminal used the absence of the dragons to slip into their nest and began stealing their eggs. It was clear he had something sinister in mind. Some demi-humans noticed the young boy and moved to interrogate him, but he panicked, unleashed the hawk that accompanied him, and fled. One of the girls tried to bring him down but missed. He was still celebrating his narrow escape when a massive dragon descended in front of him. His fate was sealed. Meanwhile, the criminal had gathered all the dragon eggs and completed his mission. He then shattered the pill he had given the boy, who dropped dead instantly. The egg he had been carrying fell to the ground and rolled to a stop before Latina. The dragon saw the broken egg and, consumed consumed with rage, assumed Latina was the one who had destroyed it. He lunged at her with lethal intent. A demi-human girl rushed to protect her, but what could anyone do against a dragon? He struck them both down with a powerful blow. They lay on the ground, helpless. At the same moment, the village felt the tremors of the dragon's attack. The celebrations halted, and everyone rushed back to their homes. Rio encountered one of the village elders along the path and asked what was happening. "The monsters are attacking," the old man said. "The forest is surrounded. We must flee at once." Rio immediately remembered Latina was still out there, and without a second thought, he raced to save her. Elsewhere, the demi-human girl was hiding behind a tree, whispering to herself, "We need to lure the dragon away from the city to protect the people. But how? This is suicide." Latina, however, paid no mind to the danger. Determined, she decided to distract the dragon herself. And indeed, the beast followed her, tearing through trees, its fury unrelenting. Just when it seemed he would kill her, Rio arrived. He struck the dragon and snatched Latina from its path, saying gently, "Stay here." Then he turned to face the beast with nothing but his bare hands. What followed was a dazzling flash. Blows flew in every direction. The girl watching from afar was in awe of Rio's overwhelming strength. She could hardly believe her eyes. Even the dragon was stunned. It opened its mouth to unleash a devastating breath, but Rio was faster. He slammed it shut, then delivered a crushing blow that brought the dragon to the ground, lifeless. When the other dragons saw their leader fall, they panicked and fled the area. Latina ran to Rio and hugged him tightly, tears of joy in her eyes. The other girls arrived, astonished by the power Rio had displayed. And so, that long day came to an end. The next morning, Latina had begun to accept what had happened. She told Rio that she had decided to stay in the village, but she would wait for him. She reminded him of everything he had done for her, then finally decided to reveal her truth. "I know this may sound crazy," she began, "but please believe me, it's the truth. I wasn't born in this world. I was born in another world, called Earth. I used to live in a place called Japan, but after a terrible accident, I found myself here." She continued, "You might be wondering why I feel so close to you. It's because you're so kind. You remind me of someone I once knew, someone very dear to me in my previous world." Of course, she was talking about Rio himself, dear reader. "I believe you," Rio replied gently. "Every word you've said, I believe it. Don't worry." He added, "By the way, I'm from Japan too. I figured everything out about you while you were asleep, but since you still seemed uncertain, I didn't want to say anything. It's true. We're the only two from Earth here, but don't worry. I will never abandon you. From now on, you're my little sister, Latina." Latina was overjoyed after hearing Haruto's words. Shortly afterward, Haruto began preparing for his departure. While bidding farewell to everyone, gifts poured in from all directions, to the point where he didn't even know where to put them. His surroundings were overflowing. An old man handed him a special bracelet, saying, "This will make everything easier for you." Indeed, the bracelet had the ability to store all his belongings, which delighted Haruto greatly. Once everything was ready, he set off toward the homeland of his father and mother. And here, my friend, begins a brand new chapter of this tale. So stay with me and enjoy what's to come. Haruto finally arrived at his destination and began noticing that everyone in the village had black hair, just like him. Yet, he didn't know whom to approach or how to begin, so he asked a girl there to guide him to the village chief. Her name was Ruri, and she led him to an elderly woman named Sai. As soon as he entered, she asked him, "What do you want, child? You don't look like you're from around here." Haruto shared his story with her and said that he had come to learn about his family's origins. He added, "My mother and father died when I was young, and I've come here to learn about their past." The old woman then asked for their names, and when he gave them, her face suddenly changed. She immediately ordered Ruri and the girl with her to leave the room. Once they had left, she looked at Haruto and said, "I want you to tell me your story in full, so I can tell you everything." Haruto began, "I used to live with my mother and father in a distant place deep within the forest, but I never met my father. He passed away before I was born. Then, my mother was killed when I was still a child. She once promised to take me to a place called Nagumo, so I could learn about our roots and build them a proper grave as a tribute." The old woman was moved by his words and smiled, saying, "Don't worry, I knew them well. They were very close to me." Haruto was stunned and asked, "You knew them? How?" Sai replied, "Because your father was my son, and you are my grandson, Haruto. Don't worry. We built 2 graves for them the moment they left the village." She then took him there to see them. As she stood before the graves, sadness filled her face. She looked at Haruto and said, "Long ago, your parents committed a grave crime. Many people began hunting them, and they had to flee the village. To help them vanish, we built 2 false graves, so that everyone would believe they had died and stop searching for them." Haruto didn't fully understand, so he asked her why, but she simply said, "I'm not the one who should tell you the rest of the story." She then returned to her home, leaving Haruto alone by the graves to pray for his parents. He sat in deep sorrow, lost in thought before the tombstones. That night, he returned to the house, changed clothes, and went to sleep. The next morning, he began preparing food, joking around with those around him. The air was calm and cheerful. Later, Haruto met a young man named Shin, and the two immediately liked each other. They decided to go hunting together. Haruto showed great skill, catching everything that came his way. As for Shin, he barely managed to catch anything. That evening, Haruto found his clothes dirty and created a bath using his powers. He entered to clean himself, and as he came out, Ruri and Alma saw him. They were stunned by how clean he looked and asked, "How did you come out this clean? What did you do in there?" He explained the idea of a bath to them. They could hardly believe it. and ran inside with delight. The next day, Haruto was speaking with his grandmother Sai when they suddenly heard shouting from the direction of the bath. They rushed over and found a man named John arguing with Shin. John shouted, "Why are you standing near the bath? Are you trying to hit on my sister? Leave this village, you filthy bastard." John was crude and harassing the girls. Shin couldn't take it and went to strike him, but he was no match. John easily grabbed him by the arm and started choking him. Just in time, Sai intervened and said, "Enough, John. If you weren't the son of the neighboring village chief, I would have locked you away until you died." John replied mockingly, "What's all this about? My cart broke down and I came to spend the night here. Is this how you treat a guest?" Sai couldn't find the words to respond. John walked away, and as he passed by Haruto, he tried to trip him. But do you really think Haruto would fall, my friend? No. John was the one who stumbled and fell, looking completely humiliated. A while later, the tax officer arrived in the village and decided to spend the night as well. During Haruto's training, Ruri and Alma were watching, amazed by his strength and physique. They asked him, "Why do you train like this every day? What drives you?" Haruto was reminded of his past love, the girl he once promised, "Even if I die, I will protect you." He told them, "It's a long story, but I'll tell you. When I was young, I loved a girl very deeply. I made a vow to keep training so that I could protect her. She's grown up now, and I don't even know where she is, or whether she's still alive. But I've never stopped training, because I believe our promise still lives. No matter how far apart we are, we'll meet again." The girls were deeply moved, filled with admiration and emotion. Later that night, Alma became scared of John and went to sleep in Ruri's room. When Haruto found out, he gave them a magical stone and said, "Place this in your room. If anything happens, I'll be able to protect you." They took the stone and did as he asked. That night, John and his gang were plotting to break into their room. They waited until everyone was asleep. John crept toward the room. Ruri opened her eyes and found him standing there, pressing his hand over her mouth. "Don't make a sound," he whispered. Then Alma woke up too, and John threatened, "If I hear a word out of you, I'll smash her face in, and you're next." But did he really think he could get away with this while Haruto was around? The legend himself stormed in and wiped out all of John's men. The moment he saw them, a vision of his mother's death flashed before his eyes. He shouted, "What are you doing?" John tried to fight back, but Haruto circled behind him, grabbed his throat in pure fury and growled, "I said, what are you doing?" John was helpless. Haruto unleashed a barrage of blows. Fist after fist smashed against his skull, unrelenting, terrifying. Even the girls were stunned by his raw power. Just as John was about to be beaten to death, the tax officer intervened and grabbed Haruto's arm. "If you hit him again, he'll die right here," he said. "I saw everything. He'll be punished for his crimes. You, Haruto, go and rest." Haruto obeyed and walked away. He stood beside a tree, boiling with rage. He whispered to himself, "Once again, I forgot my purpose. I cannot let that bastard who killed my mother continue to live. I must get revenge, no matter what." Afterward, Rio returned home, and everyone was expressing their heartfelt gratitude for saving the two girls the night before. Even the tax chief himself thanked him, and was genuinely astonished by Rio's actions. The following morning, the tax chief was preparing for departure. He took the goods with him, and also had John and his companions arrested, intending to take them to his father for trial. While speaking with the elderly woman, she handed him a letter and said, "Please deliver this to your father when you arrive." The young man replied, "All right," and began preparing for the journey. Everyone set out alongside the tax chief to deliver their goods and sell them at the market. Upon arrival, John and his group were taken away for trial, while the tax chief handed the letter to his father. By the way, his father's name was Hayate. Hayate read the letter, and a look of deep astonishment took over his face. He immediately ordered his son to go and bring Rio at once. Indeed, Rio was found and brought to the palace. As he entered and sat down with them, Hayate looked at him in disbelief and said, "I can't believe my eyes. You look exactly like her, Rio." Rio, puzzled, asked, "Like who? What are you talking about?" Hayate began recounting the story from the very beginning, saying, "Your mother belonged to the royal family. I was her servant, and the one responsible for her protection. One day, while I was training the soldiers, a strange young man appeared. He was fierce and powerful, defeating all enemies on the battlefield, and he was the reason for our many victories. I challenged him to a duel to measure his strength, but he defeated me effortlessly. From that moment, I decided to appoint him as the guardian of the princess, your mother, Rio." Over time, their bond grew closer and deeper, and the princess eventually fell in love with him. But during one of the royal meetings, the emperor's son saw her and was captivated by her beauty. That night, he sent his servant to kidnap her, but your father confronted him and delivered a fatal blow. When the emperor's son discovered what had happened, he was enraged. He demanded to marry the princess as a political arrangement, threatening to plunge the nation into war if the demand wasn't met. With no other option, the king decided to help your parents flee the village, to escape the wrath of those vicious hounds. They left, filled with sorrow. As Rio listened to the tale, his eyes burned with grief grief and rage. Hayate continued, "And now, I want you to meet the king and queen. I've already told them about your presence here, and their greatest wish right now is to see you. Will you come with me to meet them, Rio?" Without hesitation, Rio agreed and went with him. He found them seated inside the palace, overwhelmed with emotion at the sight of their grandson. They could barely believe their eyes. Joy filled their hearts, and Rio greeted them warmly as they began to converse. The grandfather then asked Rio to share his entire story, from the very beginning, so they could understand everything he had gone through. Rio began telling his sorrowful tale. "When I was little, I lived with my mother in happiness. Though we were poor, every day felt bright and full of life. Then one day, my father's old friend, Lucius, entered our home. He kicked me with his foot and drank from a bottle of medicine. My mother rushed in, asking what he was doing. She tried to stop him, but he attacked her and killed her right before my eyes. I stood there frozen, unable to move. I didn't even understand why he did it, but I swear, when I see him again, I will show him no mercy. I will avenge her, no matter what it takes." The king and queen were heartbroken by what their grandson had endured. They asked him, "Do you still intend to walk this path of vengeance? Have you considered letting go?" Rio replied with resolve, "I know the path of vengeance is dark, full of pain and obstacles, but it's the only path I see before me. I won't rest until the dog who murdered my mother lies dead." The grandfather admired his determination and said, "Impressive. But to truly gauge your strength, I want you to duel Hayate in a one-on-one battle. No one has ever defeated him, except for your father. Now I want to see if you truly have what it takes to claim vengeance." Rio responded, "I accept." They made their way to the training arena. Hayate rolled up his sleeves and charged at Rio with ferocity, thinking he was just a weak boy, but he had no idea that Rio would make him look like a mere child. Everyone watching the match was in disbelief. How could the legendary Hayate be unable to match Rio? Hayate stepped back, preparing to use his ultimate technique to end the duel. He thought it would be enough, but Rio unleashed his strongest move, the water spirit technique, and struck him down with overwhelming force. The king and queen were stunned. They said, "Well done, Rio. We are no longer worried. When your journey is complete, return to us. We will always be waiting for you with open arms." Rio replied, "All right, I'll come back." After that, Rio returned to the village. Everyone had already entered earlier, but Rory saw him standing by the graves of his parents. He was reaffirming his vow, whispering, "Now I know the full truth. I will take your revenge. Don't worry." He added, "Goodbye." Then he went home and told Rory everything that had happened. She was overjoyed to learn that Rio was her cousin, and her happiness knew no bounds. Later, Rio told his grandmother that he didn't plan to stay forever. He would remain until the next harvest, then continue his journey to explore the world. The elderly woman didn't object. She said, "All right, do as you see fit." Days passed, and Rio gradually became an essential part of the village. He helped everyone in many ways, and they all grew to love him. Life there was peaceful and warm. One day, while he was teaching Alma a few things, she realized that he would be leaving in 2 months. She was devastated, unable to hold back her tears. She whispered, "All right, I understand." She returned home in tears, not knowing what to do. Her brother saw her and asked, "What's wrong? Why are you crying? Who upset you?" She replied, "No one upset me. I just found out that Rio will leave the village in 2 months. He didn't do anything wrong. The problem is with me." Shin understood right away. His sister had completely fallen in love with Rio, so he went to the elderly woman's house and knocked on the door. Rio came out to greet him and asked why he had come at that hour. Suddenly, Shin knelt to the ground, bowed his head and pleaded, "Please, stay in our village. I know I'm being selfish, but I beg you, don't leave." His sister saw him kneeling for her sake, and her heart ached. She rushed to them and apologized for what had happened. Shin looked at her, unsure of what to do, his eyes heavy with sorrow. After that, Rio gradually began to understand the situation and realized what was happening around him. Days passed, and months followed, until the long-awaited day of the harvest finally arrived. Rio was preparing to leave, and everyone was celebrating the occasion, enjoying the food he had prepared for them, as joy filled the air. But while Rio was standing amidst the celebration, Alma approached him and asked him to come with her. Rio agreed and followed her to see what it was about. Alma stood before him, overwhelmed by shyness, speaking in a low and cautious voice. She confessed her feelings to him and said, "Please, take me with you on your journeys. I love you, and I cannot live without you." But Rio, after listening to her, gently apologized and said, "I'm sorry, but I cannot return your feelings." Alma tried to persuade him in any way she could, but Rio's heart had already been stolen by another girl the moment he arrived in the village. Shin had been watching the situation from afar and saw his sister's heart break before his eyes, powerless to stop it. The next morning, Rio began preparing his belongings and got ready to depart. He bid farewell to everyone, and all were saddened by his departure. But Alma didn't come to say goodbye, which made him even sadder, for he felt he had broken her heart. As he left the village, he found her standing there, waiting for him. She said with a smile tinged with sorrow, "I know you don't love me now, but believe me, I won't give up. I'll keep trying until the very end. I'll never grow tired. You just have to do your best to keep up with my pace, Rio. See you." Rio smiled at that moment, feeling happy that she had returned to her strong self, and replied with a smile, "See you." Then he continued on his journey until he reached the city of demi-humans, where he met Latina. The girl was overjoyed to see him return, completely immersed in happiness. Rio greeted everyone and told them he had been passing through and decided to visit. He also mentioned he was planning to build a small house to stay in during his visits, and everyone welcomed the idea and offered to help. Rio returned home and took a short nap, and suddenly he woke up to find a girl sleeping beside him. He screamed, and the girls rushed in as soon as they heard his voice, witnessing the scene with their own eyes. Rio, in panic, said, "I don't know anything. Don't misunderstand." The girls couldn't comprehend what was going on, and everyone stood stunned, unable to make sense of it. At that moment, the girl introduced herself. Yes, she was the spirit Rio had once made a contract with, the one who saved him when he was a child. But now she was suffering from memory loss, unable to recall anything about herself. Rio gave her a name and said, "Come with me. We'll go to Doris to discover who you truly are." He named her Licia. They reached the village elders, and everyone got to know her, and things went smoothly. Then Doris arrived and began analyzing her energy and speaking with her. She asked her many questions, but Licia didn't know the answers and didn't respond to any of them. Doris asked her about the elements she could use. Licia answered with confidence, "All of them." Doris was stunned and said, "All of them? Are you joking?" But Licia reaffirmed, "Yes, I use them all." Doris couldn't believe what she was hearing and asked Rio to test her. They went outside and the battle began. At first, Rio tried close combat and Licia matched him skillfully, moving cautiously, as if afraid to hurt him. Then she tried using all the elements. She wasn't joking. She really could use every element, with immense spiritual power, even vanishing suddenly from sight. It was truly astonishing. Doris intervened at the last moment and stopped the fight before they destroyed the forest. Then she began explaining more about spirits and their nature. After that, everyone stayed there for a while, learning more about each other's abilities. Days passed and months followed until Rio ended his stay there and decided to continue his journey. The villagers gave him a set of gifts, including a hairpin that allowed him to change his hair color to any color he wanted, and a magical compass that would instantly return him to the forest. He said goodbye to Latina and everyone else, then resumed his journey. His plan was to pass by the kingdom where he had studied as a child, to greet Celia, especially since he hadn't sent her a single letter in 2 full years. At that time, Celia stood in the garden, holding Rio's last letter, deeply saddened, hurt by the silence he had left her in. Charles, the meddlesome young man, saw her and began to approach with his usual words. It was clear she had been engaged to him, but he was approaching her in an annoying way she could barely tolerate. Meanwhile, Rio had arrived in the city, disguised along with Licia, so no one would recognize them. They quietly sneaked toward Celia's room inside the palace and successfully reached it. They opened her desk, but it was completely empty. There was nothing inside. Rio was shocked and asked Licia to use her magic on one of the nearby servants to interrogate him. He asked, "Where is Celia? Why isn't she here?" The man told him that Celia was now at the Duke's mansion. Rio was stunned and asked why. The man replied, "It's normal. Her wedding will be held soon. She's going to marry Charles Arbor." Rio froze in place, unable to believe what he was hearing. He immediately asked, "Is this marriage her choice?" The man replied, "No, it's purely a political marriage. 3 years ago, a war broke out in the kingdom, and the king and his daughter Flora fled. After that, the Arbor family seized power, and to strengthen political ties, Celia was chosen to be Charles's bride." Rio couldn't contain himself and decided to go see Celia himself and find out the truth. He asked Licia to locate her and learned she was at the Duke's mansion, heavily guarded from all directions. Do you think Rio would back down? Of course not, my friend. He snuck through the darkness without anyone noticing and finally reached Celia, who was in deep sorrow, contemplating burning Rio's letters. And in that moment, the hero appeared. He opened the door, and his hair returned to its natural color. Celia recognized him instantly, couldn't believe her eyes, and threw herself into his arms, overwhelmed with joy. They spoke for a bit, then she hurried to prepare some tea. Rio asked her, "I heard you're getting married tomorrow. I don't want to bother you or belittle the man you're about to marry, but Charles doesn't deserve you, does he? You know that, don't you, Celia?" She replied, barely holding back her tears, "Yes, I'm marrying him tomorrow. I know your memories of him aren't pleasant, but I've grown up now and reached the age of marriage, and I must marry." Rio asked, "Are you sure about this? Do you truly want to live with that man?" She hesitated, then burst into tears. "And if I refused, would you take me? Would you marry me? Would you take me away from this place and run?" "Of course not. Forget what I said and get out of here before you're caught." Rio didn't understand why she was acting this way, and he tried to get the truth out of her, but she refused to answer and told him, "Leave." Rio left indeed, unable to understand what was going on. As for Celia, she felt felt overwhelming happiness to have seen him again, and said to herself, "This is for the best. I'm just a puppet following orders. Rio shouldn't have to carry my burdens." At that moment, Rio stood beside Aisha, sorrow clouding his face. He was clearly displeased with the situation and with Celia's behavior, and he was doing everything he could to uncover the full truth. And indeed, the next morning, Celia was preparing for her wedding ceremony, the sadness etched deeply into her expression. Meanwhile, Charles was standing with a known criminal, and it became clear that the two had formed a secret alliance aiming to overthrow the royal family and seize the throne. The criminal sensed a spiritual presence nearby, but he couldn't pinpoint its source. As for Celia, once her preparations were complete, she stepped out of her room, only to be introduced by Charles to his 6 other wives. Yes, my friend, that scumbag was already married to 6 women, and now he wanted Celia to be the 7th. He left them to get to know one another, strutting away in his arrogance. In those tense moments, the wives turned to Celia and spoke with pure disdain. "You may be the king's daughter now, but once you marry Charles, you'll be the lowest among us. You better learn your place now, or we won't be so kind next time." Celia couldn't respond. Her heart was drowning in sorrow. Aisha had been watching from afar, and after hearing everything, she rushed to tell Rio what had happened. Soon after, Celia boarded the wedding carriage and sat beside Charles as the wedding procession began to move. Rio stood at a distance, watching everything unfold. He saw the pain in Celia's eyes and was overcome with anger and heartbreak. Can you imagine, my friend, Celia being stuck in this misery forever? But just as she stepped down from the carriage and reached out to take Charles's hand, the beast awakened. Rio appeared. He charged through the soldiers like a raging storm, seeing no one in front of him. Even those on horseback couldn't stop him. He tore through them one by one. He landed a crushing punch on Charles, then grabbed a dagger and held it to Celia's neck, shouting, "Don't move! Anyone who gets closer, she dies!" Celia was stunned. She didn't understand what was happening or why Rio would put himself in such danger. But then Rio spoke to her through telepathy. "Calm down. I'm not here to hurt anyone, and I'm not here to take you by force. I just want to know your true desire. If you wish to cancel this wedding without anyone blaming your family, just say the word and I'll make it happen. But if you truly wish to marry Charles, I'll walk away without causing any harm. I just need to know. What do you want, Celia?" She was overwhelmed, unable to think straight, but she summoned all her courage and replied, "Take me with you. I don't want to marry that dog." Rio smiled and said, "As you wish, my lady." He lifted her in his arms, looked at Charles with scorn, and declared, "Listen, mutt, I'm taking your bride right in front of you on your wedding day, and there's nothing you can do about it." Then he bolted with her in his arms. Celia was overwhelmed with joy, barely able to believe what was happening. Her family cried out, terrified for her safety. But when her father looked into her eyes, he knew something far greater was at play. At that same time, the criminal realized that Rio was using spirit magic. He began to suspect that Rio was the same young man he had seen before. He observed him closely, piecing together the signs until he was certain. He launched a powerful attack to test Rio's abilities. Rio blocked the strike, then took off, carrying Celia, while the soldiers chased after him, trying to trap him. He slipped into a narrow alleyway and handed Celia to Aisha, saying, "Take her and run. I'll catch up with you soon." Aisha didn't hesitate. She grabbed Celia and escaped, while Rio stepped back out to distract the soldiers. They all charged at him recklessly, surrounding him from all sides. But Rio didn't flinch. He unleashed his fury, sending the soldiers flying, one after another. Just when he was about to escape, Alfredo arrived. Yes, Alfredo, the strongest soldier in the entire kingdom. He attacked Rio with all his might, and Rio barely managed to defend himself. He struck again, and Rio blocked once more. Then Rio shoved him backward. The watching soldiers were in utter shock. How could this mysterious intruder be so powerful? Alfredo noticed something strange. Rio wasn't even using his full strength. Growing desperate, he gathered every ounce of power into his blade and shouted, "This is your end." He unleashed a devastating strike, setting the battlefield ablaze and destroying everything in its path. When the soldiers tried to look for Rio, he was gone. They assumed he had perished. But do you really think he died, my friend? Of course not. He escaped in the final moment and finally reached Celia. She was standing beside Aisha, and the moment she saw him, she ran to him, unable to believe her eyes. She tripped, falling right into his arms by accident. Then she quickly straightened up and apologized, thanking him for risking his life to save her. Rio simply smiled and said, "It's nothing. This is the least I could do for you." Everything seemed calm and beautiful, but suddenly, a strange light shone across the sky. Aisha grew tense and said quickly, "Rio, there's danger on the other side. They're in trouble. You must go." On that other side, 3 girls were descending from the sky. One of them was Haruto's first love. They were captured by bandits who planned to execute them. Can you imagine if one of them were to die today? No way, my friend. Rio arrived just in time. He heard the girls speaking in Japanese and instantly realized they were from his world. He annihilated the bandits and ran to unlock the door where the girls were trapped. He asked if anyone else was inside, and they pointed to another carriage. He rushed over and unlocked it, and then, boom. He froze in shock. Yes, Rio recognized her, his beloved. He couldn't believe his eyes. What on earth had brought her here? What a shock. And that, my friend, is where this episode ends. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And with that, farewell.